Spiral, dial. Sci-fi with a soundscape.
Flood, Jessica laughed. We're on a ship, at sea. A flood is one thing that isn't likely. No, I'm serious, Archie said. Come and see. He led her out of the clinic, into the deserted corridor, down towards the swimming pool. The water was crystal clear and inviting, the sun lounges empty. They made their way up to their former haunt. The plant remained there, no signs of it having suffered from their tussle with ants so long ago. Jessica remembered the note. With love, from A. Which A had it been? Amy or Ant? She supposed that either was possible. Archie pointed out into the distance. Look, there. She peered out. There was nothing but blue sky and blue sea, blue fading into blue. It was not clear exactly where the horizon was, so close were the two shades. Look at what? For the first time, she saw that he was wearing a watch. An exact replica of the watch she had tossed overboard that very first week. The sight of it brought back unpleasant memories. She half expected it to start whining, but it remained resolutely silent. Archie tapped it and brought up a display. It read 51.5072 north, 0.1276 west. I'm not a human encyclopedia, you know, Archie. Does that thing not have a map? Probably, he said. I didn't bother to read the manual, so I'm not 100% sure. What I do know, however, is that right now we're home. Home? That's right. Well, I am. I'm not sure where you're from. Those are the coordinates of London. Jessica shook her head. That's ridiculous, Archie. Isn't it more likely that the watch is wrong? It has just passed through a volcanic eruption after all. You're the geologist, but I'd say that's enough to reset any compass. True, except this is a fresh watch. You cycle, you watch. I usually bin mine at some point when it all gets a bit much. I've only just calibrated it. I assure you that we are in London, which means there's been a flood. He spread his arms wide. Great, isn't it? Great? How is that great? Let's just assume for a millisecond that you're right. If there has been a flood, then everyone we know is probably dead. Had you considered that? He nodded his head, pursing his lips. Well, yes, but for me, the true tragedy is that not everyone we know is dead. Let's take Ant and Michael as two very good examples. Patricia, another strong contender, not to mention the captain. Personally, I think God could have been a little more selective. They both gazed into the blue. Archie up at the sky, Jessica down at the sea, trying to find any trace of evidence to prove him wrong. Now that she looked, she could see shadows beneath them. Craning her neck, she shielded her eyes from the sun. Yes, there were definitely shadows there. Outcrops of rock, perhaps? or the tips of submerged skyscrapers. She forced her eyes upwards. She had wanted to leave everything behind, sure, but not this far behind, not lost beyond all recall. They both gazed into the blue, Archie up at the sky, Jessica down at the sea, trying to find any trace of evidence to prove him wrong. Now that she looked, she could see shadows beneath them. Craning her neck, she shielded her eyes from the sun. Yes, there were definitely shadows there. Outcrops of rock, perhaps, or the tips of submerged skyscrapers. She forced her eyes upwards. She had wanted to leave everything behind, sure, but not this far behind. Not lost beyond all recall. We have to find out, Archie. There must be a way to make contact. We must find the ship's radio. It's the only way to be sure. Before he could reply, the watch started to whine, flashing up with a message. Proceed to the dining hall for the first mass of the cycle. Archie sighed. Really? I thought you were exempt from mass, Jessica said. Not from the first one, Archie said. Everyone's got to go to the first one. Says who? I saw someone try to avoid it once, he said. I don't know what happened, but he just disappeared. Never seen again. That seems to be a common fate on here, Jessica said, whether you attend mass or not. Yes, but this is different. No one else was at mass. Nobody. The ship was empty. All they found of him was his watch and a shadow on the deck. It was as if he had burned to a crisp in thin air. Jessica considered this information. It seemed highly unlikely, but then so did taking a trip through the centre of the earth in a giant orange bubble. She would not put anything past Spiral Dial at this point. How about we bin the watch and take our chances? You can if you like. Me, I'm going to mass. He set off without further delay. Leave him, sister, Pyrope said. We have no need of their mass. We only need to find Earth. Let us go and search for this radio so that we can escape from this cursed vessel. Ignoring Pyrope, she followed him, despite her misgivings. She didn't want to be alone. This empty ship was giving her the creeps. At least if she attended mass, she could find out what had happened to all of the people. Outside the dinner hall they waited, but there was no noise. Silence permeated the corridor. Was it possible that no one else was there? Jessica met Archie's eye and started to speak, but he shushed her. They opened the door and were greeted by rows and rows of babies in cradles, every one of them asleep, breathing peacefully in exact unison. The sound of the breathing seemed to pass through her, resonating each time. Each baby lay in a shallow wooden cradle. A whole room filled with hundreds of babies, and yet not one of them crying, not one of them hungry, not one of them irritable. They slept. There was something unnatural about it. She found herself wishing that one of them would make a sound. Walking over to the edge of the nearest cradle, she reached out to touch the child when a sharp thud brought her motion to a complete stop. Brothers and sisters, we are gathered here today to welcome a new beginning. Just as the Lord tells us to go forth and multiply, so we celebrate the fruits of our labours through song. Patricia, for it was she who spoke, took a deep breath and led them all in song.